Thank you, Deputy. Yes. Okay, please be seated. All right, Counselor, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commander Flesland, when we left off, I was about to ask you about officer-involved shootings. Has the department developed, through Lexipol, a policy on officer-involved shootings?
We have, yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 337, which is that policy, 305.
337 will be admitted.
And this is another one we're not going to go through at length, but can you tell the jurors why you have a separate policy about officer-involved shootings in such incidents?
I would say first and foremost the significance and severity of such an incident, but it can be a slightly unique investigation to work through, and we just want to make sure that we've thought through everything ahead of time, have some best practices, have some guidance that we can lean on, that we can work through this sort of situation if it ever happens.
And in this case, did your department refer the investigation out to an outside agency?
We did.
And which agency was that?
The BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
And why was that done?
Well, we've long known that you're going to have someone else investigate it. And there's been a lot of movement through the state legislature, as well as others, as far as which agency is the maybe the preferred or the ideal one in Minnesota.
And so, the bottom line there is to have an outside agency do it.
Yes.
And if we zoom in on the policy provision here, 305.2, is that the reason for that expressed here?
Yes, the policy of the Brooklyn Center Police Department is to ensure that officer-involved shootings and deaths are investigated in a thorough, fair, and impartial manner.
Even though the department refers the investigation itself to an outside agency, does the department still have some responsibilities? No, strike that. Does the department and its officers still have some responsibilities at the scene initially?
Absolutely, yes.
And if we go, to 305.5.2, so this provision spells out responsibilities for supervisors at the scene, correct?
Correct.
And fair to say that I'm trying to speed this up to say, like, the supervisors get some information, control the scene, and then pass it on.
Generally, big picture, yes.
And securing the scene is part of the responsibility there.
Yes.
Preserving the integrity of evidence. If we were to go down a little farther, this would be just above 305.5.6. See on this page at care should be taken to preserve integrity of any physical evidence.
Yes.
So it's within the department's policy to secure relevant evidence before turning it, so that it can be turned over to the outside agency.
We want to safeguard the scene and the evidence as best we can.
And then the policy seems to separate between involved officers and uninvolved officers, correct?
Yes.
And bottom line for involved officers under the policy is what? Do they have any role in the ongoing investigation, uninvolved officers?
Not a significant active role that they're going to be taking actions on their own.
And involved officers, generally what is provided for in the policy regarding them?
Big picture, we're going to get any involved officer away from the scene. We're going to get them back to a secure location, probably the police department. We're going to make sure that physically any kind of injuries are evaluated and treated. We're going to work to help them contact union representative to help ensure that safeguards and everyone's rights are intact.
Now, I asked you earlier about the field training officer program at Brooklyn Center. You're familiar with that?
Yes.
And is there, in fact, a field training officer policy or program policy in Brooklyn Center as well?
There is, yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 344, which is the FTO program policy.
Exhibit 344 will be admitted.
And can you put that up, please? And then if you can, zoom in on the second paragraph. So this defines the policy of the department to put new officers in a structured field training officer program, correct?
Yes.
What is the purpose of the FTO program?
It's really to indoctrinate the new officers into police work in Brooklyn Center. They've already passed all the requirements by the state as far as licensing. They've got a license. They've demonstrated competency and skills in other academic programs. And now we're going to work to make sure that they know how to be a Brooklyn Center police officer.
And the policy here seems to indicate that, well, is it the intention to have that new officer acquires the skills needed to operate in a safe, productive, and professional manner?
Yes.
And does any officer get to be a field training officer?
No.
Are there requirements for that spelled out here in the selection training provisions?
Yes.
And the first paragraph, the FTO is an experienced officer, correct?
Yes.
And trained in the art of supervising, training, and evaluating entry-level and lateral police officers, correct?
Yes.
And if we scroll down a little bit farther, does this speak to training?
This part speaks to the selection of who we're going to have as a field training officer.
Yeah, I was a little imprecise there. Below the selection process, continued training.
Yes.
Are Brooklyn Center FTOs required to be trained?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to, do you know if Kim Potter was working as an FTO on April 11th of this year?
She was.
And in obtaining the personnel records, are there records concerning her training for being an FTO?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 391.
391 will be admitted.
Can you describe for the jurors what this is? And this is, I think, actually a two-page document, so I'll have you just explain both pages.
This first page is just a training notice that one of our administrative staff would have sent out notifying Kim Potter that she was scheduled for FTO basic certification. It was training began February 7th of 2011. It was a one-week course, ended on the 11th of 2011. And then once Kim finished the training, she signs it acknowledging that she finished it and submits it back to our administrative assistant to file and log it.
And does this appear to be her signature at the bottom?
Yes.
And if you can go to the second page of that exhibit, what is this?
It's the certificate of completion. So my assumption is this is what she got at the end of the training course. She returned back to the police department. When she submitted the signed confirmation slip acknowledging that she attended the training, she also submitted this certificate, just helping to show that she was there.
And this indicates, well, if we can go back to the first page, up at the top it says description of training, basic certification, correct?
Yes.
So would this be the first training as an FTO to be an FTO?
Yes.
And if then Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 392.
392 will be admitted.
And can you describe this for the jurors, please?
It's another training notification slip. This one, description of training, is FTO update. The dates were in April of 2013, so this would have been, I assume, the first refresher course that Kim attended.
And is that her signature down at the bottom?
Yes.
And then finally, I would offer Exhibit 393, which is another certificate.
393
Three, correct.
will be admitted.
And you see this as well.
Yes.
And what is this?
Certificate of completion for when Kim finished another FTO update back in April of 2018.
And Commander Flesland, are you certified to carry a taser?
I am.
How long have you been certified?
Since shortly after we got him, back in 2002 or 2003 timeframe.
And what do you mean by shortly after we got him?
When I first started in 2000, we didn't have tasers. Eventually, when we first got them as a department, there was only a handful of officers and sergeants that were allowed to carry them. They were the ones that had gone through some CIT training. And then eventually, shortly thereafter, we rolled it out to all of the whole department. So initially, I wasn't part of that small cadre of officers that had them.
And what do you mean by CIT?
Crisis intervention training.
Okay. So just and then, so at some point, did you obtain your initial certification?
Yes.
Was that while you were at Brooklyn Center?
Yes,
And then have you been recertified every year?
I have.
And when you were first certified to carry a taser for Brooklyn Center, how did you carry it? Where on your body did you carry it?
Initially, it was in a drop-down holster on my reaction side, or my side opposite where I carry my handgun.
So by reaction side, just want to make sure we're clear because sometimes there's different terminology. So what side do you carry your firearm on?
I carry it on my right side. I'm right-handed. I'm
And
dominant on my right side, so my left side is what I would consider my reaction side.
And so you've carried your taser on your left side?
Yes.
Is that throughout your career?
Yes.
Why do you carry it on the other side?
That's how the policy has always been, and that's how we've always been trained.
Okay, one last policy, I promise. Is there a specific policy on the use of a taser?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 334, which is the taser policy.
334 will be admitted.
I want to draw your attention to the second paragraph, 304.2 policy. Tell the jurors basically, what's being communicated here? What's the basic role of a taser in policing in Brooklyn Center?
Can I start by just reading it?
Of course.
The taser device is intended to control a violent or potentially violent individual while minimizing the risk of serious injury. The appropriate use of such a device should result in fewer serious injuries to officers and suspects. When we incorporated the taser into our repertoire, it gave us what I believe is a powerful new tool that can allow us more options in a wide variety of situations that hopefully, potentially, are going to minimize any unnecessary violence or injuries.
And, okay, you can take that down, please. Does the taser allow you to use force on an individual from a distance?
It can, yes.
And, is training required to carry a taser in Brooklyn Center?
Yes,
Was that laid out here in the policy under issuance and carry?
it is.
A couple of paragraphs below is a sentence that starts with members carrying. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you describe what that is, please?
Members carrying the taser device should perform a spark test on the unit prior to every shift.
Do you know what a spark test is?
Yes.
And have you performed that yourself?
Yes.
And is there an exception to this policy provision?
Not that I'm aware of.
And I'm going to have that policy addressed later, so we'll move on right for now. When was the most recent time that this policy was sent out to officers?
September 1st of 2015.
And when did then Officer Potter acknowledge it?
September 23rd of 2015.
When officers like yourself are certified, you have to go through some training for that, correct?
Yes.
And then there's some documentation of that certification, correct?
Yes.
And in your search of the personnel records, did you find some records of Officer Potter being certified?
Yes.
Do you know if she was certified to carry throughout her career at Brooklyn Park once you got tasers?
In Brooklyn Center, yes.
I mean, in Brooklyn Center? And the answer is yes?
Yes.
All right. Do you know if the department has all the records of those certifications or just some of them?
I think we've got a decent collection of them, but I don't think we have every document that we've ever had on the taser.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer Exhibits 246 through 255.
Exhibits 246 through 255 are admitted into evidence.
And I'm going to start in sort of reverse order with Exhibit 255. Do you recognize what is Exhibit 255?
I do.
And what is that?
It's Taser Certification for Kim back in December of 2002.
Okay.
And it was for the M26, which was the initial model of the Taser that we had.
Have you had some different models over time?
Yes, they've evolved.
So December of 2002, do you recall when Brooklyn Center got those initial tasers?
Probably shortly before that. That sounds like the right time frame.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 254. What is this?
Training certification for Kim when she was trained on the X26, which is a newer version of the Taser. And this was May of 2005.
Showing you then Exhibit 253. Can you describe this, please?
This looks like it's a recertification. When Kim recertified with the Taser, it looks like it was the M26 back in 2007.
I just want to take a quick look at this. You would have received a document like this when you were certified, correct?
Yes.
And the name at the bottom where it says print name, do you recognize that name?
Yes.
Whose name is that?
Sergeant Pastor.
Is that Pastor?
Yes.
And do you was he one of the Taser trainers?
He was and still is one of our Taser instructors.
And the area above that where the check marks are,
Yes.
what is the purpose of those check marks?
They were indicating what all had been included in that training session.
And back then was an actual written test required?
Yes.
It appears that Ms. Potter got 100% on that test, correct?
Yes.
I'll show you Exhibit 252. Can you describe this for the jurors, please?
It's the very similar recertification form where Kim would have gotten some more Taser or recertification on April of 2015.
And above the date on that line is a name. Do you recognize that name?
Yes.
Whose name is that?
Officer Knight.
And was she, well, it's a female officer, correct?
Yes.
And was she one of the Taser trainers?
Yes.
So this is Ms. Potter being certified again in 2015.
Yes.
There's the score of 50 out of 50 on that.
Yes.
And I'll show you Exhibit 251. Can you describe this for the jurors, please?
It's another Taser recertification form where Kim was recertified in November 2016 and was certified by Sergeant Peterson, another one of our Taser instructors.
Okay. And that is Mike Peterson?
Yes, sir.
So that's his name above the date.
It is.
And again, it appears here Ms. Potter got a perfect score.
Yes.
Showing you then Exhibit 250. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is this?
Another Taser recertification form showing that Kim was recertified November 2017 by Officer Knight.
And there is in the middle of the page, and if we can zoom in on the signature there, do you recognize that signature?
Looks like Kim's signature.
Okay. And so the signature here acknowledges what?
Receipt of Taser's version 20 product warnings, understanding that she must read and understand these warnings prior to participating in any hands-on CEW drills required by the certification course.
And if we scroll down a little, there are a series of X's And why are those there? What do they signify?
That she participated in those portions of the training, I guess. I assume that those are Officer Knight's X's.
And again, it appears that Ms. Potter got 50 out of 50 on the test.
Yes.
Showing you then Exhibit 248. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
Another Taser Recertification form showing that Kim was recertified November 12th, 2019 by Officer Knight.
Now above that, instead of X's, we have some initials, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell whose initials those are?
I believe it's Officer Knight's initials.
And above that, if we could zoom in on the signature there, that is the student's signature, which would be Ms. Potter, correct?
Yes.
And again, that's certifying that she understood and read the warnings, correct?
Yes.
And I'll show you Exhibit 247. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that?
Another Taser recertification for Kim from November 2020.
Now, at the very top of the page, there's an X by one of the model numbers, correct?
Yes.
And what model was she recertified on at that training?
X26P.
And again, there's her signature below that,
Yes.
and making the same acknowledgement.
Yes.
Below that are the indications of what was covered.
Yes.
The bottom line is blank. It refers to the X2 and X3, correct?
Yes, different models.
And again, Officer Knight, the trainer.
Correct.
And then finally, Exhibit 246. Can you describe that for us, please?
It's another Taser recertification form showing that Kim was certified March of 2021 by Sergeant Pastor.
Now, the title of this form refers to a Taser 7. At some point, did the department move to a different model from the X26?
From the X26P, yes.
Okay, and so what model was this training done on?
This document is showing training on the Taser 7.
And it indicates a transition course, correct?
Yes.
And are you currently certified on the Taser 7?
Yes,
Did you have to go through a transition course when the Taser 7s came?
I did.
And in the middle of the page there appears to be a signature again, correct?
Yes.
And that is for the student.
Yes.
There is underneath that the check marks for what all was involved in that training, correct?
Correct.
That includes a de-escalation warning arc, correct? The third line down.
Yes.
The top line is reviewing the PowerPoint presentation and training bulletins, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell a jury who was the certifying instructor for this certification?
Sergeant Peterson.
Commander Flesland, were you asked to review some videos from prior Brooklyn Center Police Department incidents in which Ms. Potter appears as an officer?
I was.
And have you reviewed those videos and still images from them when Ms. Potter was a responding officer to those incidents?
Yes.
And particularly, did you view dash cam video from a Brooklyn Center Police Department incident on April 30 of 2016?
Yes.
In reviewing that video, did you recognize the squad car as a Brooklyn Center squad car?
I did.
Did you recognize the software running the video as consistent with what your department uses or used back then for video?
It was.
And did you recognize Ms. Potter in the video?
I did.
Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 382.
Any objection to 382?
No objection.
382 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
Now, showing you this photograph, Exhibit 382, this is a still photograph from the video of that incident, correct?
Yes.
And there should be a small stylus in front of you if you want to use that and maybe draw on the screen where Officer Potter is. And when you were watching the video, were you able to discern where she was wearing her taser at that time?
I was.
And I think the two slices of video are attempts at a closer up view of that, correct?
Yes.
But from watching the video, were you able to determine where she was wearing her taser?
Yes.
And where was she wearing it?
On her left, it was on the left side of her duty belt.
And when officers are wearing their taser, are there two different orientations that they can wear it in?
Yes.
And what are those two different orientations?
I'm going to call them a cross draw and a reaction hand draw.
Okay. And what's the difference? And if it would help to demonstrate to the jurors, if you want to stand up and just show them, you can do that if you want.
The way I have mine oriented is for a cross draw. So I'm right-handed, right hand dominant. I carry my handgun on my right side, carry my taser on my reaction side. So this holster is set up so that I would cross draw using my dominant hand to draw across my body. When I refer to a reaction hand draw, the taser would be oriented so the handle is aft, not forward, and you would use your reaction hand to draw the taser that way. So it basically which way the handle is pointed, whether it's going to be forward or aft.
And Exhibit 382, can you tell which orientation Ms. Potter is wearing her taser?
Reaction hand draw, yes.
Did you also review body-worn camera video from a Brooklyn Center Police Department incident on November 2 of 2017?
I did.
Did you recognize the officers in that video?
Yes.
Did you also recognize the computer program running the video as that which your department used then?
Yes.
And did you recognize Officer Potter in the video?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to offer Exhibit 383.
383 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
And with this on the screen, were you able to determine the side on which Ms. Potter was wearing her taser?
Yes, it was on her left side, her reaction side, and it's set up for a reaction hand draw.
Were you also asked to review body-worn camera video of a Brooklyn Center Police Department incident on February 21 of 2018?
I was.
And in doing so, did you recognize the voice of the officer speaking as a Brooklyn Center police officer?
I did.
Did you recognize other officers in the video?
I did.
Did you recognize the squad car that the video was being taken from?
I did. It was a Brooklyn Center squad.
At this time, Your Honor, I'm going to offer Exhibit 384.
384 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
And is this Officer Potter in the video?
It is.
And can you determine how she is wearing her taser in this incident?
It's on her left side, reaction side, set up for reaction hand draw.
Were you asked to view body-worn camera video from a Brooklyn Center Police Department incident on November 4 of 2019?
Yes.
And did you obtain the videos for that incident from the Brooklyn Center Police Department records?
Yes.
So if you could just real briefly describe for the jury how you would do that, after a body-worn camera video is made, where it goes and how you get it.
For the body-worn camera video,
Correct.
when the recording is done, or when generally at the end of your shift, you'll take your body-worn camera off your body, you'll dock it into a docking station. We've got 8 bay chargers where 8 different body-worn cameras can dock. Once you dock that into the charger, a few things happen. The battery starts to recharge, and any videos that are on it will get pulled off of the body-worn camera and pulled onto a city network. It's a secure drive, it's a secure network, and there's a repository there for the videos. We'll access the videos, or we can access the videos through, again, it's a web-based program or interface. I guess it's not actually a web-based, correct. It's a standalone system on our computers, but we'll log in and we can access the videos. Different people have different rights, different abilities to view videos. Every officer has the ability to view their own video, has the ability to categorize it, attach a label to it, whether it's a case number or such, and then part of that labeling will determine data retention, how long it will be retained for. Certain supervisors have the ability to go in and view anyone's video. So that's what I was able to do in some of these, is when I had a case that I was going to look at, or a time, date range, I was able to plug that in, pull up all the videos that satisfied that request, and that's how I was able to find these videos.
And did you recognize Officer Potter in the video?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 385.
385 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
And are you able to determine how Officer Potter is wearing her taser during that incident?
Yes, it was on her left side again, set up for a reaction hand draw.
Did you also obtain video from a Brooklyn Center Police Department incident that occurred on June 15 of 2020?
Yes.
And did you recognize the officer in that incident as a Brooklyn Center Police Department officer?
Yes.
And you obtained this video in the same manner as you did the previous one?
Yes.
Did you recognize Officer Potter in the video?
I did.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 386.
386 will be admitted and you may publish.
Based on this video, and just for the record, this is a still from that video, are you able to determine how Officer Potter was wearing her taser on that occasion?
Yes, it was on her left side, set up for a reaction hand draw.
And for purposes of this, did you also review a portion of Officer Anthony Lucky's body-worn camera video from this incident?
I did.
And Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 387.
387 is admitted over defense objection and you may publish.
And from that, are you able to determine how Officer Potter was wearing her taser on that date?
It was on her left side, set up for a reaction hand draw.
Based on your role as a commander, are you familiar with how records are kept of training attendance?
Generally, yes.
And is there a computer program that you have to keep those attendance records?
We've had a few programs through the years.
Okay. And So is attendance at trainings for officers kept in the ordinary course of business at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
Yes, they are.
And were you able to obtain a summary of all of the trainings that Officer Potter has attended since being a Brooklyn Center police officer?
As much as our systems were able to allow us to.
And, Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 335.
Exhibit 335 will be admitted and you may publish.
So I'm going to scroll through this. We're looking at page 1 of Exhibit 335, correct?
Yes.
And, just for lack of a better term, this looks to be kind of a spreadsheet, correct?
Yes.
And this is for Ms. Potter's attendance, correct?
Yes.
So on the left column is in yellow is a date for an entry of the year, correct?
Yes.
And then the blue column, the numbers in blue, are for what?
Date attended.
Then there's a red column, indicates completed.
Yes.
And then there is a type of training column and a name of training column, correct?
Yes.
Do you know who enters that information, the name?
Someone from our records division.
And it also keeps track of the number of hours, correct?
Correct.
And so then if we scroll down, this starts in 2021 and works backwards, correct?
Yes.
And then so let's keep scrolling down until the format changes. Here we see a slightly different version once we start 2016, correct?
Essentially, it's the same. It just appears to be black and white.
Right. So we'll keep scrolling down. Now here we see slightly less robust version of that, correct?
Much less sophisticated.
So this was a previous version of the software you used to record these?
Yes.
All right. Then let's just keep scrolling down. So these are trainings that go back to 96, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, those are all the questions that I have for this witness.
Okay. Counsel, you may cross.
That last, it's good afternoon, I guess. It's 1 minute after 12. I get a drink of water. Would it be fair to say, Commander, that our client, Kim Potter, did not miss any training sessions throughout her career?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And the exhibit that you just went through with the prosecution, that was a record of her training, correct?
Yes.
And you know Officer Potter from the years you worked with her, correct?
Yes.
And she took her training seriously, did she not?
She did.
However, when you train as a police officer, no matter how much training you do, it's not like real life, like an emergency situation out on the street, is it?
Never exactly, no.
And you don't know how you're going to react until that emergency situation takes place, correct?
Correct.
So, the report that you gave the prosecution, or a statement you gave them, was about Officer Potter, or former Officer Potter, in what she did as a police officer in addition to her job. And do you remember telling them that? I'll refresh your memory. Did you tell them that she worked as a field training officer? We know that, correct?
Yes.
Did she get paid for that?
Yes.
Any extra pay? What about a crisis negotiator team member? Was that a volunteer situation?
She volunteered for it and was selected. Yes.
Okay, and what is a crisis negotiator team member? What do they do?
Sometimes they're referred to as hostage negotiators. They really can work in collaboration with maybe a SWAT team trying to resolve an incident. They're communicators. They communicate with someone that is perhaps committing a crime, perhaps in crisis, a variety of situations where crisis negotiators will try and persuade people to resolve the situation as peacefully as possible.
And do you know how long she was on that program?
Several years. I don't know exactly how many years.
And that's a program that you volunteered, is that right?
Yes.
And with respect to DART, what is that?
DART is Domestic Abuse Response Team. It's a collection of officers and detectives that have volunteered to help address some ongoing domestic abuse or domestic violence incidents. We found through research, and it's best practice, once our officers respond to a domestic abuse sort of situation, they may come up with a resolution for that night, whether it's an arrest or whatever. But we will have volunteer officers that have volunteered for this program reach back out to domestic assault victims days or maybe a week later. For a variety of reasons. They could collect more evidence. Maybe there's bruises now that appear that weren't visible initially. And then the officers can help, hopefully, establish a rapport with that victim, help them navigate the upcoming process through the criminal justice system, help make sure they have the resources, trying to end the circle of violence.
And she did that for many years?
Yes.
And besides that, she worked as a LEMA. What's LEMA? What does that mean?
Law Enforcement Memorial Association.
And what is that?
It's an organization.
Was she an honor guard representative?
Yes, she was.
Tell us about that.
The organization is set up to support fallen peace officers and their families. The honor guard portion of it performs at funerals of officers that are killed in the line of duty. There's also a variety of other events that they perform and support that fallen officers' families.
And has she done that for many years?
Many years.
And did she volunteer to do that?
Yes.
Now, with respect to her being a union steward and president, was she voted into that position by the other officers?
Yes, by the other officers and detectives in the 82 union.
And so that the jury understands this type of union steward, her only duty is to negotiate a contract with the chief. Is that a fair statement?
I believe there's many more duties besides just negotiating contracts.
And what else would there be?
They're there to represent the officers and detectives, or whoever's in that bargaining unit. They can help that officer negotiate if they believe they've been wronged and are going to potentially go down the grievance route or something like that. The union stewards can help them navigate that process so that
And they're voted in by the other officers, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's also a non-paying volunteer job?
Correct.
In your 21 years there, has Officer Potter ever been accused by the public or anybody of an abuse of power, use of force? Has she ever been accused of using her position abusively?
Not the,
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
not that I'm aware of, sir.
And has she ever been charged with any violation of the policies at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I'm aware of some driving incidents with motor vehicle accidents, but
And that was back when she first started, correct?
I believe so, yes.
There was 2 car accidents within the first couple of years, is that right?
That was the version I heard.
And that was about 24, 25, 26 years ago?
That sounds about right, sir.
Now, on these policies that we talked about, excuse me again. First, we'll do the vehicle pursuits. That was policy 307. That policy deals with a vehicle that's moving, correct? Or stopped and took off.
Yes.
For example, if a police officer goes to stop a vehicle and it takes off like a jet, you don't chase it for just a traffic violation. Is that correct?
Generally, no, but that's just one of the factors that would have to be evaluated.
All right. And that has nothing to do with a vehicle that's stopped at the scene and you're executing a warrant for the arrest. Is that correct? About a car fleeing?
I think one situation could potentially lead into the other situation, but generally, no.
But the officer, potentially that would lead in, the officer that stopped that vehicle, or officers, would attempt to stop the vehicle from fleeing, correct?
I guess I'm...
Well, the officer stopped the vehicle. Hypothetical, this case, 3 officers come up and try to arrest the individual for a warrant, trying to find out who the TRO, if the girl in the car is the person in the TRO. No license, no insurance, no real identification. Would they be in their right to stop that person from fleeing once he was stopped and he was outside the car?
Objection, Your Honor. Mistake.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Based on the way you laid it out, yes.
Well, what difference did I make from what actually happened here that day, sir? Was there something I didn't add?
I haven't investigated what happened here this day. I
Have
have
you-
limited knowledge of the particulars of this.
Okay. Have you looked at the videos, the body-worn camera videos of this incident?
I've seen portions of it.
All right. And did I misstate anything that you saw on that video?
I don't believe so.
And by the way, Officer Lucky is still working with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, is that right?
Yes.
And he didn't receive any sanction or punishment for his conduct that day, did he?
Objection relevant.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
No.
And what about Sergeant Johnson, the man that went in the car to try and stop Mr. Wright from leaving? He worked at the Brooklyn Center Police Department up until recently, correct?
Yes.
Was he ever sanctioned or punished or anything as a result of his conduct that day?
No.
And with respect to foot pursuits, that would be if you start chasing somebody out in the park, and if he's gaining ground on you, or if you're gaining ground on him, if it appears futile, you stop chasing him. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's one of the factors those are some of the factors that would be
And
considered.
it depends on what you're chasing him for. If you're chasing him for shooting somebody, you would chase him a little longer than you would if he had parked his car wrong, correct?
I'd like to think I would, yes.
Okay. And then we get to the use of force. You can use deadly force in your Brooklyn Center if force reasonably anticipated and intended to create a substantial likelihood of causing death or great bodily harm. Is that a fair statement? That's the...
I believe that's a fair definition according to our policy.
Okay. And that's the definition of deadly force.
According to our policy, yes.
That's what I'm talking about. And if someone hypothetically is inside a vehicle that's trying to take off, and part of his body's hung out and part of it's in the car, and the car took off, that person would be dragged down the road, correct?
Very likely, yes.
And that would cause great bodily harm, fair statement?
I would be concerned about that, yes.
Or if the car all of a sudden went in reverse and that body was hanging part on the car, it would also cause great bodily harm, correct? Was that speculation? I'm sorry.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
You've experienced in your 21 years as a commander and as a police officer situations like that, haven't you?
Some.
Where officers were injured at the scene by somebody that
Yes.
they're trying to arrest?
Yes.
In fact, nowadays, isn't it true that the officers, and I believe I wrote it down here someplace, it's incredibly, this is how you described it, sir, in the beginning. It's incredibly more difficult, and I throw in dangerous, nowadays to be a police officer. Do you remember saying incredibly more difficult when you first testified? Here, did you say that?
I don't remember those specific words comparing it to another period, but
Okay, well, is it incredibly more difficult nowadays to be a police officer than it was when you first started out?
I think so, yes.
More guns?
I see more guns more frequently now than in 2000.
And when you do a traffic stop, that's a very dangerous stop, is it not?
It can be, yes.
And that's because you don't know if the individual you stop has a gun or not.
Correct.
You don't know if he has a warrant, correct?
Correct.
And you have to find that out. In fact, you approach a car, a vehicle that you stop for some reason, and you don't know who you stopped, correct?
Sometimes you know who you stopped, but
Okay,
oftentimes you don't.
right. Okay. And when you're somebody you don't know who you stopped, that causes you to be concerned about who it is, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And in fact, you get the license, and what you do is you go back to your car and you check the license on your computer to see if there are any warrants, correct?
Oftentimes, yes.
And also to see if there's any restraining orders, correct?
Yes.
And if there is a bench warrant for weapons violation, does that alert you a little bit more that maybe this guy might have a gun in his car?
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
It would be concerning, yes.
And when it's determined what reasonable force can be used, and I'm talking about deadly force, you look at the totality of circumstances, correct?
Yes.
And in your policy, and I believe it tracks the statute somewhat, all facts and circumstances, and this is a definition of totality of circumstances, all facts and circumstances known to the officer at the time taken as a whole, including the conduct of the officer and the subject leading up to the use of force. At the time of when you use the reasonable force, what you know at that time authorizes you to use either reasonable force or maybe deadly force, correct?
Yes.
It's not something you'll learn later. It's right there, that time what you perceive at the time that you use the force, correct?
It's based on what a reasonable officer would know, perceive at that moment without the benefit of hindsight 2020.
Yes. And that's indoctrinated into all of you officers as far as exercising reasonable force, deadly force. You have to know, what you know right then. It's not later, it's right then, what you perceive. And that's part of the law, correct?
Yes.
And you can use force to effect an arrest too, correct? And that's in your policy.
Yes.
You can use force in effecting a lawful arrest, execution of a legal process, enforcing an order of the court, and a bench warrant is an order of the court, correct?
Yes.
And executing any other duty that may be imposed by you by your position, correct?
Correct.
And then there's another one, and the use of force to effective arrest in your policy, in preventing the escape or retake following the escape of a person lawfully held on a charge or conviction of a crime. You can do that too, correct?
Yes.
And if somebody's outside of a vehicle and there's a bench warrant for a weapons violation, and if he tries to flee, you can use force to stop him, correct? Reasonable force.
Yes.
And if he keeps resisting after using the physical force of pulling on him, getting him out of the car, you can also use other forces, like a taser, correct?
Yes.
If the car isn't moving. And if he still persists on it, after the man is warned that I'm going to use a taser, and he keeps fighting, and another officer is now in the car trying to stop him.
Objection.
I'm not done with my question.
The objection is overruled. You may finish.
And another officer is in the front seat laying over the passenger trying to stop this guy from going. And he is ignoring the warnings, taser, taser. I'm going to tase you. You have a right to use deadly force to save that cop, that police officer that's lying over the seat, correct? It's in
The
policy.
objection is overruled. You may answer.
Potentially, yes, but I wasn't there.
I know.
Yeah.
But if that fact scenario, yes. You've got to save that officer that's laying over the seat, correct?
Yes.
If you're dragged down the street by this driver, if he gets away, that man's going to be seriously injured or dead. Fair statement?
Could likely happen, yes.
And some of the factors in your policy, the immediacy and severity of the threat to officers or others. And if somebody's lying over that seat and another individual, an arrestee, is trying to get away driving and he ignores the taser,
Objection.
that would be the severity of the situation, would it not?
Asked and answered.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
That would be, I'll rephrase it, that would be the immediacy and severity of the threat to the officers, would it not?
I think it would be severe and significant, yes.
And the conduct of the individual at the time of being confronted by the officers, that's another factor, is it not?
It's a factor, yes.
The effects of suspected drug or alcohol use, that's another factor, correct?
Yes.
If you go up to the car and you see marijuana shake or seedlings or whatever it is, and you smell marijuana, that would be an indication from an experienced officer like yourself, there may be marijuana in that car, correct?
Good, yes.
Or maybe the fellow driving the car is using marijuana, correct?
Possibly, yes.
And when the individual doesn't comply with your demands, you have to escalate the force that you use, correct?
Sometimes, yes.
And when you go up to that car and you know it's a weapons bench warrant, where this man has been charged, although it's a gross misdemeanor, with having a weapon on his person or in his constructive possession without a permit, correct?
That's a mistake.
Well, the objection is overruled. You may answer if you can.
You want me to rephrase it?
I would be extremely concerned
Okay.
if I was going to arrest someone that had an arrest warrant for some sort of weapons violation.
In the policy with respect to moving vehicles, that's talking about vehicles moving. It's not talking about a vehicle stopped, correct?
I think that policy on vehicle pursuits talks about vehicles moving or potentially initiating a vehicle pursuit. Or are you talking about the shooting at or from a moving vehicle?
Yes.
The shooting at or from a moving vehicle, I believe, is focused on a vehicle in motion.
But if, okay. How would you describe Kim Potter as a police officer in Brooklyn Center from the 20 years that you worked with her and you were her commander?
Objection scope.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
She's a good cop. She's a good person. She's a friend. I have no concerns going to calls with her. I had no concerns with her.
And now we're
You're interrupting him.
inside the proper bounds of evidence.
Okay, let's sidebar, please. The objection is sustained. Don't answer that, please.
And I'd ask that the previous portion of the answer be stricken and the jury's vote is
Your Honor, you said that.
I'll let the answer stand. The reason for me sustaining the objection is beyond the scope of the direct.
Did you, on the date of this incident, did you and the police chief Gannon go over to Kimberly Potter's home?
Yes.
objection scope.
I don't know where he's going. I'll let you said yes, I'll let the answer stand.
Why did you go there?
Objection scope, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. You may answer that.
We have been told she had hurt herself.
You mean self-hurt?
Okay, the objection is sustained now. And the jury is to disregard that last question and answer.
May I confer with Mr. Engen? I think I'm done. Thank you, Commander. I'm done.
Mr. Prime, Mr. Frank, I think we're going to take a lunch break, unless it's going to be like 5 minutes.
I would think so, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, members of the jury, we're going to take our lunch break.
I thought it would be quick, Your Honor.
Oh, you said it would take 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's not quick enough.
Okay, sure.
Should I go ahead?
Sure.
Trying to be thoughtful of the officer's time as well. You were asked, Commander Flesland, about the use of force and things to consider. I won't be quite as demonstrative, but does the law and your policy also require that officers take into consideration the potential injury to officers, suspects, and others through their use of force?
Yes, that should be a factor that's considered.
Do they also have to consider collateral injuries, injuries to others by their use of force?
Yes.
Do they also have to consider less force, if they can?
If they can and it's reasonable.
You were asked about people who are fleeing, and it was represented to you that, how would you think about that if they weren't fully identified? Should an officer take into consideration when deciding how to handle a fleeing person if they have been fully identified?
That could be a factor.
I object unless is he talking about somebody?
Okay, no talking objections.
I'll withdraw the objection.
Oh.
I can't remember if you answered the question fully.
Could you restate the question,
Sure.
please?
In deciding the amount of force to use, you were asked a lot about a person who was fleeing. And is one thing an officer should consider is whether they have already fully identified that person.
That should be one of the factors considered.
And are officers then, in exercising force, whether it be deadly force, are they required to use no more force than necessary?
They should use no more than is reasonably necessary to accomplish the task.
You were asked several times, in very dramatic ways, about how an officer should act when people are hanging out of the car. Or remember some of those examples?
Yes.
Were your answers to those questions based entirely on the representations from counsel about the fact scenario of those questions?
Excuse me, I'll place an objection.
Overruled.
So, you recall the question.
If you could state it one more time, please.
You were asked on many occasions about various factual scenarios and how you would react to those and perceive the use of force in those. Mr. Gray made representations to you about the situation and asked your opinion. Do you recall all of that?
Yes.
Were your answers based entirely on what Mr. Gray was representing to you as the facts to consider?
No, I included other thoughts I guess I had.
About what? I mean, what other thoughts?
Other situations I may have been involved in, may have witnessed.
Sure, in deciding how you would act or what you might do. But I'm saying all of the facts of that incident, Mr. Gray gave to you, correct?
I was trying my best to answer based on the facts that he had said.
Regarding this incident involving Ms. Potter, did you interview any witnesses?
No.
Did you watch all of the body camera or dash camera video?
No.
Have you reviewed any of the reports regarding the case?
No.
In the answers that you were giving to Mr. Gray, are you basing those answers at all on what happened with Ms. Potter and Daunte Wright on April 11th?
I'm sure I'm thinking of the small portions of the video that I've seen and relying on Mr. Gray laying out a set of possible events.
But do you know if any of those events occurred?
They seem to be in line with the portions of the videos that I saw, but I am by no means an expert on what happened that day.
Well, you said you didn't watch all the videos.
No.
Haven't interviewed the people involved.
No.
And so you're allowing, when you're answering these questions, are you answering them based on the additional drama that Mr. Gray has added to the situation?
Object to that is asked and answered in meeting, and asked that you not mention drama again.
Okay, yes. The objection is sustained as to using drama.
All right. I'm sorry about that. Let me ask it this way. Are you offering an opinion on Kim Potter's use of force that day?
No.
Your answers to Mr. Gray, you've been telling us you had this video in your mind, not based on, or your answers to Mr. Gray's questions, not based on what actually happened out there, but what little bits you saw, plus what Mr. Gray added for you.
I was trying my best to answer him based on what Mr. Gray was explaining the events that he articulated.
You indicated that training is not real life, correct?
It's never exactly like real life.
Is part of the training trying to teach officers to think in stressful situations in real life?
Yes, we strive to try and really encourage critical thinking. We try and make training as realistic as we can, but we acknowledge we can't make training exactly like real life.
And would a good police officer try to make good decisions under pressure?
Object to that is leading, Your Honor. Also, opinion of the witness.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
I expect good officers to make good decisions.
You were asked about moving vehicles, and does an officer have to take into consideration whether a vehicle that's sitting still could be put in motion when they're deciding whether to use force and what level of force?
It should be a factor considered.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
I have just a couple of things. Good afternoon, Commander. You did see parts of the video of the traffic stop in this case, correct?
I've seen parts.
Okay. And you did say that good officers make good decisions, correct? You just testified to that?
My hope is good officers make good decisions, yes.
And you did describe Kimberly Potter as a good officer, correct?
I did.
I have no further questions.
Anything further? Please step down. Okay, members of the jury, we are going to start. It's like what is it now? It's almost quarter to one. We'll start at 1:45. Okay, so you get a full hour for lunch. Okay, have a good lunch.